Darkspun is a new Pokemon in Gen 9 that you would really not expect to do much of anything in competitive. The power level of modern Pokemon is very high, and these stats just don't quite cut it anymore. Darkspun is ranked in the 0 used tier, the lowest possible usage-based tier on Smogon, which pretty much means that nobody uses this thing competitively, except for this player named Lana, who shocked everyone when a Darkspun was seen in their Gen 9 Ubers tournament game. Ubers is a format with very few restrictions, where the metagame centers around the most powerful legendaries in the entire game. Koraidon is the most popular and powerful legendary of them all, with its incredible stats and powerful Orichalcum Pulse ability. But this team from Lana had no legendaries on it at all, and amazingly, it won. What was Darkspun doing on the team? It was the Koraidon answer. Yes, this little dog made out of bread is able to counter the most powerful Pokemon in the entire game. How in the world is this possible? And how did it actually work? And what are some other unique Pokemon choices that you wouldn't expect to counter powerful legendaries? Let's take a look. But first, an update regarding Magcargo's monarchy. It seems the realm is now at peace, with a level-headed individual like this running things at a snail's pace, and I'm sure nothing could possibly go wrong. Subscribe to the channel so that we may maintain peace and prosperity throughout the known world at this time. Thank you. Darkspun is one of the most flavorful Pokemon designs of Gen 9 in many ways. While its stats are unimpressive, everything else about it seems quite solid. A mono fairy typing is very good defensively, and Darkspun has an excellent signature ability, Well-Baked Body. This ability grants a fire immunity, and when hit by a fire move, you gain 2 stages to your defense. Darkspun has a decent defensive move pool as well. You have Wish, a solid healing option that can also heal up your teammates. Play Rough is okay for Fairy Stab to at least do some damage, and you also have Body Press, which synergizes with Well-Baked Body, dealing damage based on your defense stat. Unfortunately, Darkspun doesn't have much in the way of good progress making. No status moves to speak of, no hazards, no knockoff, not even a pivoting move or anything to be really proactive. So Darkspun is a pretty passive Pokemon that has good defensive traits but can't really leverage its good defensive qualities into much meaningful value. Back when Chi-Yu was running rampant in OU, people looked at Darkspun as a potential answer. Darkspun is immune to fire and resists dark, making it pretty effective into Chi-Yu's stab types. Even though this dog can't do much after hitting the field against Chi-Yu in terms of long-term progress, Chi-Yu was so central at this time that being able to hard wall it was quite valuable. But this didn't even work very well. A simple Psychic for neutral damage against Darkspun would devastate the poor boy, and it could actually 2-hit KO if a Choice Specs was equipped. Nasty Plot Chi-Yu sets could also overwhelm Darkspun pretty easily. But even though Darkspun was not successful at consistently answering Chi-Yu, its defensive traits are actually perfect against Koraidon, the most popular Pokemon in Ubers right now. Koraidon is an absolute monster, with a dragon fighting type combination and the ability Orichalcum Pulse, which sets Sun on the field and grants Koraidon with an attack boost. Ever since receiving Scale Shot in the DLC, Koraidon has been the premier threat in Ubers. A loaded dice set with Swords Dance and Scale Shot is one of the best win conditions you can use, ramping up very quickly in its speed thanks to the Scale Shot speed boost and often destroying entire teams single-handedly. The most common offensive move combination on Koraidon uses Scale Shot for Dragon Stab, Flare Blitz for coverage boosted by the sun it creates, and Low Kick for fighting coverage. A great move in Ubers that deals damage based on the enemy Pokemon's weight. Most powerful legendaries are very heavy, but little Darkspun over here is immune to Dragon, so Scale Shot is not a problem, is immune to Fire, so Flare Blitz is not a problem, and resists fighting, so Low Kick is not a problem either. On top of this, because Low Kick is specifically used, Darkspun takes nothing from this move because Darkspun itself is a very light Pokemon. Koraidon is also times 4 weak to Fairy, so with a simple Play Rough, even with no attack investment off a pretty unimpressive attack stat, you are threatening Koraidon's life. Koraidon pretty rarely runs any kind of coverage that threatens Darkspun significantly. Even the Choice Scarf or Choice Band sets use the same coverage combination and maybe U-turn as the final move, which Darkspun also resists. The worst thing that could happen to Darkspun coming in is that they U-turn out to something else, which is not the end of the world, and to run coverage specifically for Darkspun would be crazy for the Koraidon player. It is not a common Pokemon at all. Of course, Duckspun is still not a great choice in Ubers overall. It's not very good into just about anything else. It's specifically good against Koraidon, and its low stats overall will be a very exploitable weak point for teams. And the problem still remains where even though it can wall Koraidon very effectively, it doesn't get much out of that. It doesn't make any progress or do anything. But this team by Lana is a stall team, and sometimes stall teams aim to just defend. This team is also using Skeledirge, a common Pokemon in Ubers who is usually a response to Koraidon, but sometimes Skeledirge can be overloaded. It has a lot of jobs. It has to check Zacian Crowned as well. It has to check other physical threats. Sometimes Koraidon can overwhelm Skeledirge with Terra Fire to become immune to Burn, and powerful neutral damage, Dragon-type attacks or Fire-type attacks if they have terrestrialized Fairy. So Duckspun's purpose here is to take some heat off of Skeledirge. Skeledirge can focus on handling the other threats it needs to check, while Duckspun specifically handles Koraidon. The reason this team doesn't have any legendaries at all is because it doesn't need them. Most of the powerful defensive Pokemon in the game are not legendaries. With Duckspun on the team, Koraidon, who is the most common stall breaker in the format, cannot really ever break through Lana's team. Duckspun will just come in every time and stop it, giving Lana time to slow down the game, set hazards, and eventually set up for the win condition of Skarmory with Iron Defense and Body Press. This team was victorious in Ubers Premier League against a squad using Koraidon, Miraidon, and Arceus, three of the most powerful Pokemon in history. Ubers tiers are often very centralized around extremely powerful Pokemon, and this is something you can exploit. This team by Lana was prepared to handle every common threat in the game, and Duckspun's only job was to specifically handle Koraidon and nothing else. And in this format that is so centered around Koraidon, this is a team role that can actually have great value. Another very unique Pokemon that is actually more successful in Ubers than you might expect is Klefki. Klefki is a set of car keys with advanced intelligence, and much like Duckspun, it looks unimpressive in its stats, but everything else about it makes it a surprisingly good fit in Ubers formats. Steel Fairy is perhaps the best type combination in Pokemon with many defensive applications. Klefki is immune to Dragon, which comes up all the time in Ubers, a format where powerful legendary dragon types roam free. Klefki resists Dark, which is great against Yveltal, and resists Fairy, which is great against Xerneas. And unlike Duckspun, Klefki is actually great at making long-term progress and really threatening many of these powerful legendaries. Klefki has the ability Prankster, which is one of the best support abilities in the entire game. Prankster means that all of your non-attacking moves have a priority on them, which means your speed stat doesn't matter. Klefki has access to Thunder Wave, which is a great status ailment that inflicts paralysis. And with a priority boost on this move, it doesn't matter how fast the opposing legendary is. Even a Xerneas with a Geomancy boost is going to be vulnerable to this Thunder Wave and completely ruined for the rest of the game. And Klefki also has Spikes, an entry hazard that will deal damage to the opponent's Pokemon every time they switch in for the remainder of the game. Klefki feels pretty good in Ubers formats, with its great defensive typing allowing it many different opportunities to hit the field, and all of these useful status moves to actually do something once it does. And finally, another unique Pokemon design that is surprisingly effective against legendaries is of course Shedinja. Shedinja is one of the most novel Pokemon designs in the whole franchise, with a very interesting mechanic exclusive to it. Shedinja is hard-coded to only have a single point of HP, meaning that any kind of damage it takes whatsoever will knock it out instantly. However, to make up for this, Shedinja has the ability Wonder Guard. Thanks to Wonder Guard, the only attacks that will damage Shedinja are super effective attacks. So Shedinja is completely immune to a lot of types, and sometimes legendary Pokemon don't commonly use any of the types that do hit Shedinja. Shedinja is famously effective at walling Kyogre, one of the most powerful Pokemon of all time. Kyogre's common attacking types include Water, Ice, and Electric, none of which are super effective against Shedinja. So this little bug can completely stonewall the legendary Water type. Shedinja can do the same against Xerneas, who commonly uses a set consisting of Moonblast for Fairy type damage, Thunder to hit enemy Kyogre, and often Focus Blast as the final coverage or some kind of utility option. None of these hit Shedinja super effective. Even the powerful Zygarde Complete struggles to hit Shedinja with its common sets. Zygarde Complete's 1000 Arrows attack has the unique effect of being able to hit flying types, but this will not bypass Shedinja's Wonder Guard, and against the little bug it will have no effect at all. After hitting the field, Shedinja does at least have some good status moves, including Will-O-Wisp to apply Burn and Toxic to apply Poison. Shadow Sneak can sometimes be useful to finish off a low health enemy with priority, and Poltergeist was a nice option that Shedinja got in Generation 8. A pretty hard hitting ghost type stab move. Shedinja's attack stat is its best stat, and it can actually hit impressive damage with this move, which is useful to break Substitute if Kyogre tries to play around Shedinja that way. Shedinja tends to prop up in many Ubers formats over the years for these unique properties against specific targets. Often a Pokemon like Kyogre is the main win condition of a team or their main offensive threat, and Shedinja can completely stop their game plan in its tracks just by existing. The very centralized world of Ubers formats can lead to some very interesting Pokemon choices here and there. When powerful legendaries are so common that they are on almost every team, it becomes much more worth it to run hyper-specific counterplay to hyper-specific Pokemon. And this can lead to some of the most unique looking teams in any competitive Pokemon formats.